the Department of Basic Education is working on new LGBTQI plus guidelines for schools. The new guidelines are aimed at helping learners, management, teachers and governing bodies deal with gender and sexual diversity. We're joined by Likho Bottoman from the Department of Basic Education. Likho, good afternoon to you and thank you very much for availing yourself. Just a little bit of background in terms of how we got to this point.
So it was after the realization of the violation of human rights of children who are in our schools who present with diverse sexual and gender identities. And we've been in and out of court to try and secure the dignity and the human rights of our children who present with diversity. And we realized that at a constitutional and at a legislative and maybe also at a policy level, there is a lot of good provision for schools to be able to deal with the phenomenon in schools. However, we realize that there is a sense of incapacity in terms of application of that law and application of those provisions of policy. And we realize that maybe we need to create an instrument that will guide our schools to be able to do this.
Right. Has this instrument in the form of these guidelines been drafted? And if so, rather, what is contained therein?
So we've drafted them already and taken them through the Council for Education Ministers. And in fact, the council is the one that then indicated that we probably then need to go out and consult on these guidelines so that we ensure that we take into account all the inputs from the different stakeholders that are responsible for child protection in particular. And what we're really proposing here in the guidelines briefly, Dudu, is that we're saying that we want our schools to be spaces of survival for children who find themselves to be coming with diverse identities. We want them to feel that they are wanted, want them to feel that they've got a space in our schools and not feel that they need to drop out or even in worst case scenarios, committing suicide because they feel like they are a misfit in the schools. And it's a right that they have that needs to be upheld at all times. All children, irrespective of their differences, they've got to access education, stay in school and achieve educational outcomes.
And so when we take a look at a point that you mentioned a little bit earlier on in terms of being in and out of court and trying to protect the rights of these children, where's the resistance coming from? And also maybe in terms of this process, have you been met with resistance from parents of some children? For instance, there's a story that I saw of a young child who was not allowed in one of the boys' toilets even though he identified with a different gender.
Our platform of engagement with the parental fraternity actually is with the school governing bodies. So we do have a national consultative forum. And, we have been received with positivity. It looks like this is something that the school governing bodies have been hoping for in terms of guidance and direction from the Department of Basic Education. In fact, the National Consultative Forum has really supported this process because they also wanted the school governing bodies to have something that they can fall back on when they try to facilitate issues of inclusivity and inclusion, particularly social inclusion of children with diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. But where we find problems is with particular parental groupings, particularly those that represent religious groupings and those that represent a particular stance in terms of, there's a certain belief that it's too early to be talking to children and with children about sexual and gender identity, which is something that is it's a contested area that we're trying to, agree with these particular groupings of parents. We also realize that teachers themselves, although there are particular professional standards, by which teachers need to abide as they carry out their responsibilities, their professional responsibilities. We realize that sometimes their social identities and their attitudes and beliefs with which they come into the schooling space, into the professional space, tends to penetrate the professional space. And that's something that we just need to manage as the Department of Basic Education.
How does the department plan to manage that? Is it through workshops for the teachers, or is the department thinking of maybe even including this as a subject, right, as part of the curriculum for children as well? Because it's one thing to have the guidelines and to talk to the parents, but when the children interact even amongst themselves, you can find that there's going to be problems.
Maybe it's important for us to start at what is available or what has been done so that we can then understand what we plan to do as the department. So in terms of education or curriculum of teachers in universities, in 2017, we did an investigation, or rather an assessment of what the teacher curriculum looks like in South Africa broadly. And we discovered through the British Council and the support that we've received from the European Union funding that generally South African universities that train educators do have an offering of education at some level when it comes to rights-based education, inclusion, inclusiveness, inclusivity, and things like multiculturalism, etc., and all of those things combined, even the constitutional standards of the country. So in terms of pre-service training, I think really universities have made a very good effort to prepare their teachers. And so on top of that, we then agreed with the universities that we then develop a module that we call Teaching for All, which will then impart some knowledge and skills on teachers pre-service and in-service on diversity management in the classroom. And so what we're going to do now going forward with the South African Council for Educators is to identify certain areas in the country where we could start in terms of workshops and webinars, just as a way of sensitization of educators that are already in the system about the direction in which government is going in as far as management of diversity of this area.
Good to know. Thank you very much, Likho Bottoman from the Department of Basic Education.